All right? If you're studying for the SAFE exam, you know it feels like you're memorizing a mountain of laws. But what if I told you there's a much easier way to make it all stick? In this explainer, we're going to walk through the story of U.S. mortgage law, from the Great Depression all the way to today. Trust me, once you understand the story, you won't just remember the laws, you'll be ready to ace that exam. Let's jump in. So, you're probably asking yourself, why on earth do I need to know about laws from the 1930s for my exam next week? It's a fair question, and the answer is simple. Every single law we're going to talk about was created to solve a huge, real-world problem. If you can just remember the problem, the law that fixed it will instantly click into place. Think of it as the ultimate study hack. So here's our roadmap. We're going to tackle this in 4 parts. First, we'll see how the government literally built the mortgage market from the ground up. Then we'll get into the big wave of laws that were all about protecting consumers. After that, the massive reforms that came after the 2008 crisis. And to finish, we'll tie it all together so you know exactly what to focus on for your exam. Okay, let's start at the very beginning, and I mean rock bottom, the Great Depression. You have to understand, before the 1930s, there really wasn't a stable national mortgage market like we have today. The whole economy collapsed, and it basically forced the government to step in and build one from scratch. This first era really comes down to 3 huge moves by the government. And look at the dates. They didn't happen overnight. These were really deliberate, strategic steps taken over about 30 years to first build, then stabilize, and finally oversee this brand new market. First up, in 1934, Congress creates the FHA. Now, its main job was actually really simple, but it was a total game changer. It was created to insure loans made by private lenders. Suddenly, the government was telling banks, hey, if you lend money and the borrower defaults, we've got your back. That federal guarantee gave banks the confidence they needed to start lending again, which kickstarted the housing market and made home ownership a real possibility for millions of Americans. Okay, so the FHA solved the confidence problem, but that just created a new one, a cash problem. See, banks could only lend out the money they physically had in their vaults. Once it was gone, it was gone. So just a few years later, in 1938, Fannie Mae was born. Its job was to buy those FHA-insured mortgages from the banks. This was brilliant because it pumped cash right back into the banks, freeing them up to go out and make even more loans. This is what created the secondary market that our entire system relies on today. So by 1965, you've got all these new programs running, but it's kind of like a ship without a captain. So Congress established HUD as a big cabinet-level agency. Think of it as the federal government's headquarters for all things housing. And this is critical for your exam. HUD oversees the FHA, and as we'll see in a minute, it's also in charge of enforcing some really important laws. So the market is built, it's up and running. But a functioning market created a whole new set of issues. And so the focus of the law took a dramatic turn. It wasn't about building the system anymore, it was about protecting the people inside of it. The problem back then was really twofold. First, you had widespread and, in many cases, legal discrimination in housing and lending. It was a huge issue. Second, borrowers were getting hammered with hidden fees and really confusing credit terms that they just didn't understand. This environment was just not fair, and it led to this huge wave of new laws in the late 60s and 70s. Okay, this table right here, this is pure gold for your exam. So let's break it down by the problems these laws were made to solve. First, let's talk discrimination. In 1968, you get the Fair Housing Act, which is enforced by HUD, and it finally outlawed discrimination in selling or renting a house. Then, in 74, ECOA took it a step further and banned discrimination in the actual credit application itself. So that's the discrimination bucket. Now for the hidden costs bucket. TILA, back in 68, was all about transparency, forcing lenders to tell you the true cost of credit. And then RESPA in 74 got rid of all those nasty surprise fees at the closing table. Now, for your exam, notice 2 things. Congress created all of these, and see that enforced by column? While HUD handles the Fair Housing Act, those other 3 big ones, TILA, RESPA, and ECOA, are now mainly enforced by one powerful agency we're about to meet, the CFPB. So, for decades, that system of consumer protection laws was pretty much the standard. And then, bam! The 2008 financial crisis hit, and it triggered the biggest overhaul of regulations that we've seen in our lifetime. You know, the 2008 crisis wasn't just a small hiccup. It exposed these deep, systemic flaws in the mortgage industry. We're talking about everything from reckless lending practices to a total lack of accountability. The damage was so massive that Congress really had no choice but to step in and completely redesign financial regulation. The response from Washington was like a rapid-fire 1-2-3 punch. First, right away in 2008, you get the SAFE Act, which went right after the standards for loan originators. That was quickly followed in 2010 by the enormous Dodd-Frank Act, which basically reshaped the entire financial world. And, born right out of Dodd-Frank, was a powerful new agency to enforce all the rules, the CFPB. Now pay very close attention here. The SAFE Act is literally the reason you are studying for this exam right now. No joke. Passed in 2008, it tackled that accountability problem head-on by creating the first ever national licensing and registration standards for MLOs. It created a whole new level of professionalism and consumer protection. Then came the big one, Dodd-Frank in 2010. For your exam, the easiest way to think about this is as the giant umbrella law of the modern era. It was massive. It created all kinds of sweeping new rules, like the ability to repay standard, but its single most important creation was a brand new federal agency. And that agency is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. It was created by Dodd-Frank to be the one, single, powerful watchdog for consumers, the new sheriff in town. Remember TILA, RESPA, and ECOA from the 70s? Well, the CFPB became their new primary rulemaker and enforcer, consolidating a ton of power and focusing 100% on protecting the borrower. Okay, deep breath. We've covered almost 100 years of law. So let's bring it all home and highlight exactly what you need to lock in for your exam. So let's really nail this down. First, every law we talked about was a reaction to a crisis. It's a pattern. The government's first job was to build the market with the FHA and Fannie Mae. Once that market was up and running, the focus shifted to protect consumers with laws like TILA and ECOA. Then the 2008 crisis hit and reset everything again, creating the SAFE Act to regulate you, the MLO, and creating the CFPB to be the main enforcer for most of these consumer laws. This is the whole key. If you remember the story, the why behind the law, you will absolutely remember the what on exam day. And that pretty much brings us to today. The history of mortgage law is this clear pattern of problem and solution, action and reaction. So as you finish up your studies, here's a final thought for you. Based on the challenges we're seeing in the market right now, what problem do you think the next major mortgage law is going to be created to solve? Thanks for watching, and seriously, good luck on your exam. You got this.